Hi everyone, welcome to Hooking A. It's my first video on the channel. I'm going to be doing a series of videos on learning how to crochet for absolute beginners. A little bit about me. I used to teach crochet at my local yarn shop and I used to do it for a living. I've had quite a few people ask me about learning recently, what with everybody being on lockdown and people wanting to pick up a new hobby. So as I can't actually go and help anyone in person, I thought I'd do a couple of videos just to go over the basics and get people started. Today in this video I'm just going to show you the very basic things that you need to know before you start. So just about choosing the right hook and choosing some yarn to work with that hook. Future videos I might go over some of the other tools that come in handy, but those are the basics that you need. So hooks to start with. Most people when they start to crochet tend to end up with one of these. These are pony hooks. You'll find them in pretty much any haberdashery place. The company mainly make knitting needles, but they do also make some crochet hooks. Any crochet hook that you get will have a little number on there. Just try and get this into focus. You can see on this one it just says 3mm on there, and then the other one has got US H8. That's a US hook size. We don't use those in the UK. To be honest, those still confuse me. It's easier to just go by the number in millimetres, which is 5 on this one. All that refers to is how thick the hook is, and that helps you decide what size hook you need for the project that you're on. So these are your basic hooks. They're very simple. They're metal as well, so they're quite hard. They can be quite uncomfortable for a lot of people. You can see this is actually quite bumpy where the numbers are. Depending on how you hold your hook, they can actually press into your fingers quite a lot. There's just no giving them whatsoever, and this does put some people off when they start quite soon on because they find it really uncomfortable. Other fairly widely available options that you'll find is this kind of style of hook. You quite often find these on sort of eBay, Amazon. If you're looking for like a set of crochet hooks, you'll get these sets of metal ones in different sizes, usually going from about 2 up to 8 or 9mm. Very similar to the pony hooks in there. They're made of metal, so they're quite hard wearing. Again, the size on these is just in reference to how thick they are at the top. They're another type that can be a little bit uncomfortable for some people. Again, depending on how you hold your hook, you can see there's quite a thin edge on that one. And again, being metal, there's no giving them whatsoever, so it's not going to be flexing while you're working. Some people prefer to start off with something really basic like a plastic hook. Plastic, although it's hard, it's a little bit more forgiving. As you'll find, you've got a little bit of bend in these, so it's not going to be quite as resistant. However, they do have the potential to snap completely. They're good for kids, but for adults I would say try something a little bit more sturdy to begin with. Another option, if you prefer not to use metal, would be a wooden hook. Bamboo's quite popular. You'll quite often find these when you get free sets with magazines. Bamboo tends to be quite a popular choice when they give away sets. You can get metal hooks as freebies as well, but obviously these are a bit cheaper, so they tend to be more common. Very similar, you'll just find that they're a little bit flatter on the hook. Some people find that easier to work with, some people prefer not to. Personally, I don't like bamboo hooks, just because I find that sharp edge can sometimes split the yarn that I'm working with, but then you've got other people who swear by them. It's really just down to personal preference. Going back to sort of the metal and the other ones, an option if you don't want to sort of fork out for ergonomic hooks, you can get these rubber grips which go over the middle of the hook, make it a little bit nicer for you to hold. If you find that they're a little bit slippy, gives you a little bit more grip and it's a little bit softer on your fingers. You can also get some hooks that have a sort of more moulded handle on them. This is a Katia hook. You can see it's quite a big one because it's a 10mm hook. So this is a little bit more comfortable for you. It's a larger handle, so it's easier to hold. And you get all sorts of different varieties of handles. This one's just a firm plastic one. I think this was a freebie with a magazine. you'll notice that that was quite a big hook that I showed you a minute ago. So they do come in various sizes. Like this is a 12mm hook, so you use this for working with very chunky yarns, and they go all the way down to these tiny little ones. You've got one here that's like 0.75mm, and I'll just try and show you the end of this one. It does still have a hook. It's very, very tiny, and these are used for lace crochet normally. So you're working with yarn that's same as cotton thread that you'd be, you know, sewing a hole in your clothes with. So it does have to be very, very tiny, and you need good eyesight for those as well. The hooks that I tend to go for more than anything are ergonomic hooks, like this one. They're made with just your standard metal hooks, the coloured ones that I showed you before. They're like these, but then they have a handle made out of modelling clay, like Fimo, and that kind of thing. And then they just get baked in the oven, which sets it. The ones that I use have the size on the bottom as well, so I know which one it is. This one, you can see it's got a rounded barrel. The place that I get these from, she does also make them with more of a flat edge. These particular ones are by Flea Bubs and Lala. The first ergonomic hook that I ever tried was one of hers, and I really liked it, so I kind of stuck to the same one. I will put a link down in the video description to her website if anybody does want to sort of check her out. But those tend to be the hooks that I use day to day, just because I find them the most comfortable. So that's your kind of hook basics, and I'm going to explain why we need particular sizes and how they relate to the yarn that you're going to use. So typical ball of yarn here, there's usually loads and loads of information on the label, and it may as well all be in some alien language if you don't understand, or if you've never looked at them before. The most important information that you need on these are, first of all, what's your yarn made of? So with this one, for example, 100% acrylic. So if you've got something like a wool allergy, acrylic is going to be fine. There's no actual real animal fibre in there. So also if you prefer not to use animal fibres, if you're vegan or anything like that, again, acrylic, it's cheap and cheerful. And then you've got the weight, that's the weight of the ball. So there's 100 grams of yarn here. And then you also have how long it is. So there's about 300 meters of yarn. Usually you'll need to know that for, if you're making things like garments, it will usually tell you how much meterage you require. And then this is the important bit down here that we want to know as a beginner. You see in this little diagram, you've got some knitting needles and a crochet hook pictured here. Let's try and zoom in a little bit. And you've got a number 4 underneath it. So what that's telling you is that you want 4mm knitting needles or a 4mm crochet hook to work with this fabric as standard. You can use a different hook size. This isn't prescriptive, this is a recommendation. Some yarns might only have the knitting needle symbol on there and the number. That's fine. Knitting needles are also sized in millimeters, the same as crochet hooks, so you can just use the hook size that it says on there. Sometimes it helps to know that if you haven't got the symbols on there, for example, like with this one. You see this one's got merino wool, acrylic and nylon. And then it tells us here that you need 5mm, that would be hook or knitting needles, or the US size 8 hook or needles, whatever that is. So obviously this is a slightly thicker yarn, which is why you want a larger hook. And then something like this is a sock yarn, so it's very, very thin, so you want a smaller hook with this one. And you can see that, where is it? Here we are. You'll see there's washing instructions on these as well, but for this one, knit or crochet hook, you want a 2.5mm hook. For those, that's just so you get a nice neat row of stitches that are all sit next to each other. Again, it's a guideline. It depends on what you're trying to achieve with the fabric. If you want to do something out of a really thin 2.5mm yarn like this and use a great big 12mm hook, that's totally fine too. You can be quite creative with crochet. It's a little less limiting than knitting is. It's a lot easier to kind of make it up as you go along. The biggest difference between crochet and knitting being that when you knit, so you have all your stitches along your needle and your garment or whatever it is you're working on is attached to it completely, and it's all underneath here. With crochet, you are only going to be having a couple of loops on your hook at once, and each stitch that you create, you take the hook out of it each time to go on to your next stitch. So you'll only ever really need to leave your hook in one loop, and then the rest of your garment or whatever is just going to be hanging off the end like this. Much less likely to unravel if you have to put it down for any reason. A lot easier to sort of just fix the ends off if you've got to come back to it another time. And if you do make a mistake, it's not quite as difficult to fix as it is with knitting. You do find the only downside between the two is that crochet stitches use up a lot more yarn than knitting, so you will need more yarn than you expect if knitting is what you normally do. So that's your hook basics and your yarn basics pretty much, and I will be back with some information on how to actually get started once you have got your yarn and your hook.